address. Keep your hands up and follow orders. This is the FBI. We have a warrant.
They handcuffed me and my wife out here. They wanted me to sit on the curb while they were carrying this out, something that I refused to do. They wanted my wife to sit on the curb out here, that she refused to do.
As I was coming out, this big old drone met me.
The only revolutionary organization that's done something here on the ground practically for African people is that's come under attack. Institution that offers a community radio station, a newspaper, a commercial kitchen, an Aquaba Hall rental space, and community office for our organizers. That was the building that has come under attack.
You need a breach? What do you need?
Need one.
I don't know.
Let's hold that, let money.
Hold
No,
it.
thank you.
We will build a movement of white people that says hands off the Uhuru movement.
They see in the African People's Socialist Party a vanguard for the struggle for the liberation of our people. They see that because not just what we do here in the United States, but because we had the temerity to do like Garvey, to do like Malcolm X, and take the struggle of black people around the world.
I cannot be silent in the face of such cruel manipulation of the poor. My third reason moves to an even deeper level of awareness, for it grows out of my experience in the ghettos of the North over the last 3 years, especially the last 3 summers. As I have walked among the desperate, rejected, and angry young men, I have told them that Molotov cocktails and rifles would not solve their problems. I have tried to offer them my deepest compassion while maintaining my conviction that social change comes most meaningfully through nonviolent action. But they asked, and rightly so, what about Vietnam? They asked if our home nation wasn't using massive doses of violence to solve its problems, to bring about the changes it wanted. Their questions hit home, and I knew that I could never again raise my voice against the violence of the oppressed in the ghettos, without having first spoken clearly to the greatest purveyor of violence in the world today, my own government.
Uhuru. Uhuru comrades, welcome everybody on today. My name is Mwezi Odom. I am the chairperson of the Hands Off Uhuru, Hands Off Africa Counteroffensive. And I just want to appreciate everybody for being on today. Today we are here because we have some major updates and some, very exciting speakers, and just an opportunity to continue to sum up the worldwide, situation and resistance that we are seeing globally, and to salute the work of the colonized and oppressed forces, around the world who are a part of this, struggle, and who are a part of the crisis of colonialism. I'm a member of the African People's Socialist Party, and I'm also joined here today on today's program with my co-MC and comrade of the African People's Solidarity Committee, Comrade Penny Hess. So I want to welcome up my co-MC who is on the ground in St. Louis. Uhuru, comrade.
Uhuru, Jerwezi. It's so great to be here today, and I want to join in welcoming everybody for this very, very important webinar held by Hands Off Uhuru, Hands Off Africa today.
Uhuru, thank you, comrade. Yeah, great to be here. We do have an exciting program, and Chairwoman Penny is one of the Uhuru Three. Those of you who are just joining us here on today, you'll be hearing about the Uhuru Three if this is your first time. And those of you who have been with us from the very start, I want to just take this quick opportunity to salute Chairman Amalia Shatella, Chairwoman Penny Hess, and Chair Jesse, who are the Uhuru Three, and who have been in this battle for over 3 years now, fighting back against the FBI attacks in July of 2022, which was the video that you saw earlier in this, in the openings video. So just to, advance our program, we do have, as I said, an exciting program on today, and we have a very special guest with us. I actually don't know if she's on yet. If she's not, please let me know. Oh, yes, I see Attorney Adderley there. So I just wanted to really take a moment to appreciate Attorney Suzanne Adderley, who is the president of the National Lawyers Guild, who is going to update us on the case of the kidnapping of Uhuru, the bogus prosecution of Venezuela's elected president, Nicolas Maduro, and first combatant Celia Flores. The National Lawyers Guild has supported the Uhuru Three from day one. I just want to make note of that, including passing a national resolution at the convention to support Hands Off Uhuru and the fight against FARA, which is the Foreign Agent Registration Act. So just wanted to make sure that we continue to put forth some of those who were there on the front line still to this day. So Attorney Adderley, we're so grateful to have you here. And I have a brief bio that I'd like to read as you come on camera to introduce you. So Suzanne Adderley is the president of the National Lawyers Guild and the founder of the Middle East North Africa Labor Solidarity Network in the U.S. She has been a legal worker with the Arabic Network for Human Rights Information in Cairo, a longtime community organizer challenging the U.S. government's war on terror policies. The daughter of Jordanian workers, Suzanne has been active in anti-war and Palestine solidarity organizing in the U.S. since her youth. We are happy to have Suzanne Adderley with us today to update us on the illegal U.S. kidnapping and bogus prosecution of Venezuelan President Nicolas Maduro and first combatant Celia Flores. So welcome, Comrade Adderley. It's great to see you here. Uhuru.
Uhuru.
Uhuru. Thank you. Thank you for the invitation. My internet is not that stable all the time, so let me know if it's hard to comprehend and I can go off camera. So yeah, I visited Venezuela for the first time in 2006. Before I was a lawyer and I was an organizer. And to go and learn from the tenets of the Bolivarian Revolution. And, you know, uh, since becoming a lawyer and, being active in the National Lawyers Guild, and particularly in its international committee, I've also visited Venezuela in different capacities, twice to monitor local and presidential elections, including Maduro's most recent reelection. And also on occasion to speak up in solidarity with political prisoner Alex Saab, and as well as taking in an international delegation to look at the impacts of economic coercive measures on Venezuela. Um, and I've done this in my capacity as National Lawyers Guild, but also as a member of the Bureau of the International Association of Democratic Lawyers, um, in both organizations in which who have very vehemently condemned the outright kind of piracy and banditry of the U.S. empire in their actions in the Caribbean in the past several months, and particularly in the invasion of Venezuela and the kidnapping of its sovereign leader and first combatant Celia Flores, and conducting a massacre in the wake of that. And I think yes, we do understand that for many of us, we see international law as being something that is not hasn't been useful or hasn't been, is really um, kind of been made a joke of, especially when we look at the past few years, not just in Gaza, but also, now with this aggression against Iran and what we've seen in the Caribbean. However, we still think it's imperative that that we make it explicit and clear of the many violations of international law that the U.S. have committed in the kidnapping and aggression against Venezuela, as well as everywhere else. Um, I had the opportunity to actually meet President Maduro in 2021. I was there for the regional elections, and I was invited as part of a group to um, go and do a meet and greet with him. We talked actually about baseball. And I talked a little bit about the work that we were doing in the United States to bring attention to the economic sanctions or economic coercive measures that were being imposed not just on um, Venezuela, but on many countries around the global south. It was part of a large effort to look at the use of economic warfare, economic measures, as a method of imperialist subjugation, particularly of the countries of the global south. And in looking at sort of the impacts of these economic sanctions, blockades, economic coercive measures on countries in the world, from everywhere from Venezuela to Cuba to Gaza to Zimbabwe to North Korea, we did see a long pattern of the use of these policies for imperialist domination, but we also saw what was a long pattern of resistance to that domination. And the ability of countries, despite these imperialist attacks, military or economic attacks, to continue to develop, to continue to sort of build their sovereignty. And that is what the United States and their allies above all cannot let happen. They are holding on to whatever hegemony they still have left. They are doing everything to oppose the development of a new multipolar world order. And any sort of like project of sovereignty is a threat to that power, whether it be Iran or it be Venezuela. And I think that the January 3rd invasion and the attack and the kidnapping, I think for most people in the world, including in the United States, it was blatantly illegal. It was blatantly barbaric, really. The question is what can we do about it, right? And I think one of the things that we really need to commit to doing is calling for the freedom and release of President Maduro and first combatant Celia Flores. sometimes I think um, in in the movement to continue to be in solidarity with Venezuela and with Cuba, and particularly in support of the Bolivarian Revolution, and making sure that that can hold strong and preserve, and in the you know you know in the movement, sort of sometimes I think it's easy to forget that we need to be putting as much attention on what is happening with with political prisoners, as well as what's happening on the ground, with the development of with the continuation of the Bolivarian Revolution. And so I think we need to remind everyone the importance of calling for Maduro's release, and for being very vocal on the illegality of his detention in the first place, and being very vocal on this really absurd case against him and against Syria. I was at the courthouse the day of the indictment, and I was at the courthouse also recently during the status hearing, in which they were just discussing the motion to dismiss. And I have to say that this case has really become a spectacle. Media is rushing to get in. There's a well-organized, seems to be like well-funded group of pro-Trump, right-wing, anti-Maduro protesters, who are doing everything to make sure that they can get into the courtroom and stand outside the courthouse in order to try to present this narrative of Maduro being a criminal, right? And that is what we really directly have to challenge, and not just challenge in the minds of the right wing. We also have to challenge that in the minds of the left, who members of the left who, I think are failing to step up to be vocal about this particular case. Now, I don't know how much everyone knows about the case itself, but the first indictment against Maduro that came out in 2020, with all of these sort of very trumped up political charges, is really not something that shocking when we consider that the United States has a whole history of using trumped up charges and labels of everything from, foreign terrorists to material support to terrorism to narco terrorism, as a way to criminalize, and go after their own enemies, right? Um, Fast forward to 2026, and the original indictment against Maduro it looks very different, because the United States for years tried to argue that he was the head of a cartel that the United States now admits never ever existed. And so what's left is really what, in my opinion, and in the opinion of many others, are weak sort of allegations of conspiracy for narco-terrorism and furtherance of supporting foreign terrorist organizations like FARC and etc. And some weapons possession charges in relation to that. So the case itself is quite weak, right? Um, and I think just like in the kidnapping of Noriega, uh, there is a whole question of whether or not there is even any jurisdiction to prosecute Maduro. Because what the United States has done in those two cases and a few others too, is that they didn't wait to get to sort of prove the jurisdiction. Instead, what they would do is just go and put this put the defendant in custody through an illegal invasion and kidnapping. Then, well, actually, no, first they would lay out an indictment, then they kidnapped, and then they're bringing them to court. And in the federal courts will usually say, okay, yes, we think that we'll usually sort of like shrug at the illegal process in which a defendant is put into custody, such as the illegal kidnapping of a sovereign leader, and instead shrug and say, okay, since they're now in court, despite whatever process it was that brought them to court, now you can establish jurisdiction. And so I think it's going to be very important for the defense to sort of be able to sort of like challenge, and to really put forth kind of an opposition in the defense to the method in which Maduro ended up in court and detention in the United States in the first place. And by doing that, we'll be interrogating US imperialism itself, right? I think also there's an important defense of sovereign immunity, um, which I think probably the government will try to undermine by saying that Maduro was never a legitimate leader to begin with, because they have been trying to push this narrative for years that the elections in Venezuela were not free. Um, the National Lawyers Guild actually put out, I think, what was a very important report in the last presidential election about why we thought that the election was fair, and why we thought the United States and how we thought the United States and institutions like the Carter Center were actually trying to interfere themselves in free and fair elections by putting out a false narrative about the elections from before even the elections even started. And you can find that online. I think that, despite like the weaknesses, despite the challenges, and one other thing that is sort of an indication of I think the prosecution's knowledge that things are quite weak is they're trying to interfere in the very sort of like counsel of Maduro. They are claiming that, they revoked a license for his attorneys to be able to obtain funds that are coming from Venezuela to pay for the legal fees. And the government is trying to argue that those funds they're alleging that they came out of Maduro's plundering of Venezuela's wealth. And by doing that, they're basically violating Maduro's right to counsel, the very essence, of due process and fair trial. I think that the government is trying to influence who represents Maduro, because I think that they know that they have, a weak case. Um, but despite all of these details, this is a very political case. This is a case that could go on for a very long time. Um, and we need to sort of be involved in sort of changing the narrative in the public sphere, um, about who Maduro is, and about the illegality of his prosecution in the first place, the motivations of the U.S. imperialist government, and why Maduro should be free, why Maduro and Ceballos should be free. I think we should be demanding their freedom. We should be demanding to know they are in good health. The last we heard that Maduro has been in solitary confinement. We should be doing everything that we can, including, and I was just actually in a meeting a little while ago about the possibility of mobilizing a group of international jurists to come and monitor the trial itself, to look for any violations of fair trial that might come up, as a result of anyone's actions. But I think something like that will be very important. And I know that there'll be future mobilizations at the courthouse, as well as at the detention center in Brooklyn where he's being kept. And I know that there's going to be future calls for national days of action, to call for Nicolas Maduro and Celia Flores's freedom. Yeah, and I think that, like, it's important that all of our organizations make that a priority. So hopefully, I hope that that was somewhat informative.
Uhuru. Wow, thank you so much, Attorney Adderley. There's, quite a lot of information that you're able to provide from those of us who, like you said, calling out just the illegitimacy of this, of the kidnapping, of the so-called, charges, as well. And I just want to really appreciate, the National Lawyers Guild, you yourself, for, providing this update. Some of the things that you said here, and I know I know my co-host is on here too, so I won't be too long-winded, but I just wanted to appreciate your, recognition of this as a political case, as a political, trial. As we understand, it's an attack on free speech, an attack to organize, for self-determination and the sovereignty of the Venezuelan people. And, this is really important for us as we talk about the case of the Uhuru Three, because none of this is happening in isolation, and it should not happen in isolation. And this is exactly what they did as well. The indictment, as you were kind of laying it out, the attacks, and then also one thing that we just want to say that was really, important in the case of the Uhuru Three was the power of the people and being able to put out this analysis. And so we just really want to unite with as many people as possible, being there to mobilize and to counteract all of these, like you said, well-funded groups. We have another comrade who's on the call right now who was who was also there on March 26th and who witnessed that same, blockade essentially of anybody getting any, even, steps close to the courthouse itself, and and the opposition. And so just I hope you'll stay on. Well, actually, no, you do have to leave, I believe, right, Suzanne? Yeah, but we would love to have you back on again. And we have other members of the NLG who are also on this call who have been, very supportive in this struggle. So I just really want to salute the National Lawyers Guild. Comrade Anna Kapati is here in San Diego, who's also joining us as well. And so, just a broad reach. And if there's any information you can share or keep us updated with the call for international jurists, we would love to be a part of helping to put that out there in the world as well.
Thank you so much, Uhuru.
Yeah, thank you. And I know you went to the Cuba convoy. We didn't get a chance to talk about that this time, but maybe in the future
Yeah,
you can say
absolutely.
more. Yeah, great. All right, Suzanne, thank you so much, Attorney.
Thank you so much, Attorney.
Uhuru. Great. Wow. Well, really grateful for, just really want to appreciate Suzanne Adderley for joining us today, and we hope to have her back on again. So who, Chairman Penny, I know we're
Yes.
going to move. Yeah, go
I just
ahead.
wanted to say, really appreciated that and her coming on and the support of the National Lawyers Guild for the Uhuru Three, and how familiar some of the things she was talking about sounded, and just the whole way that the attack came down against Chairman Omali Yeshitela, and myself and Jesse Neville as part of the attack on the chairman. Just like the chairman always said, that the attack on the Uhuru Three was the canary in the coal mine, and you can see them using kind of the same playbook to take this on, make these attacks here and around the world. And that was, just really want to salute her. And that was a powerful presentation.
Uhuru. Yes, really was. Thank you, comrade. And yeah, I unite. And this is why we're here on today as well, because, this is no different than the centuries long, attacks on the people's right for freedom. And today, actually, today is Saturday, April 4th, and it marks the 58th anniversary of the assassination of Dr. Martin Luther King. And, as we recognize that we're still fighting for the rights of African and oppressed peoples and our anti-colonial free speech, the right to organize in our own interests. And it's also 58 years since the assassination of Bobby Hutton, who was the youngest member of the Black Panther Party in 1968, was when he was assassinated on April 6th, so just 2 days from now in Oakland, California. And so all of this is a part of what we, want to continue to sum up in today's meeting. We do have a goal to raise, towards the Uhuru 3 legal appeal, and we'll be talking about that more as well in the program. But before we jump into our PowerPoint, we just wanted to say just a couple things, that we're inviting everybody to go to handsoffuhuru.org/donate. You can help us reach our goal. Today, we are raising $1,000 towards the overall cost, which you'll be hearing from our appeal team about, how much we're looking at to beat these oral arguments. But Chairman Penny, did you want to say a little bit about the part of the major update that we have? Yeah.
Yes, thank you. Thank you, Chairman Wasey. And yeah, I'm really excited. We are going to have a major update on the mobilizing for the oral arguments for the appeal for Chairman Omali Shatella and the Uhuru Three, and Comrade Jesse Neville is going to be talking about that a little bit later. And we wanted to do it with the usual very strong mobilization. We want all out. We're going to get more details soon in the next period of time, but we have sort of the general overview now, and I'm very excited we'll be talking about that today. And, just the appeal against this bogus conspiracy conviction. And we're going to, again, all out to hands off Uhuru, hands off Africa.
Yes, Uhuru, comrade. And so I look forward to hearing more about that coming up in the program, or, putting that out there. And today, so as I mentioned, we'll be hearing from the Uhuru Three, Chairman Omali Shatella, Comrade Jesse Neville, who we'll hear from as well later. And we have Comrade Penny Hess on with us. And we'll also be talking about the important work of the Hands Off Uhuru, Hands Off Africa counteroffensive. It's always been about the attack on Africa and African people and the U.S. front of the African Revolution. This is why the attack on the African People's Socialist Party, happened on July 29, 2022, recognizing it as an extension of, and as the party has determined to complete the Black Revolution of the 1960s. So that was an attack on Africa, and we recognize that. And we have to build committees. And this is something that we're going to be calling on everybody in today's meeting to participate in the work that we're going to be putting out, to build committees on the ground wherever you are located to help put forth the work of Hands Off Uhuru, Hands Off Africa, and build committees wherever you are located. So this is all a part of the important work also to, as we heard, mobilize for the appeal, help, fundraise and, provide political education, sum up what's happening, that there's no separation from the kidnapping of the president President Maduro to what is happening in Iran, Palestine. All of this is happening under the crisis of colonialism, and we have a responsibility to put that out there. So again, building committees is one way that you can also help us reach our fundraising goal. But for today, we want to appreciate everybody for, being on today as well. One more reminder, you can go to handsoffuhuru.org/donate to help us reach our goal. And we're going to start now with, we're going to begin with an overview of the campaign. We're going to pull up a slideshow and just sum up the global crisis of colonialism, and salute other comrades and, organizations that have been a part of this work. Even particularly those who have just returned from Cuba from that historic convoy. We just really want to salute those comrades as well who weren't able to join us on today, but we just want to make sure that we sum all that up. So thank you, comrade. I see the PowerPoint is on. So Uhuru means freedom. This is a word that you hear us say often in these meetings. It is a Swahili word, and a word that was used when the Africans in Kenya fighting British colonialism, the Kenya Land Freedom Army, used this term, Uhuru, to call out for freedom. But this was more than just, as the chairman reminds us, just words. This was an affront, or this was an attack and resistance to colonialism, to the colonial mode of production. And this is the work that we are a part of. We are a part of an organization and a movement who believes that power should be, fighting for power to be back in the hands of all colonized and oppressed people. So when we say Uhuru, we are very serious about that. And this is why we are even here on this webinar today, because of our, real practical and material, approach to winning freedom back in the hands of the colonized people, Africa, and all colonized people. So we just want to appreciate everybody for being on today's program. Again, we're excited to announce that the Uhuru Three are going back to court for this landmark appeal, and we're going to say more about that in today's webinar. So Uhuru comrades, Liberdad, and the Hands Off Uhuru Hands Off Africa counteroffensive was initiated in July July 29, 2022, with the goal to stop the FBI attacks on the African People's Socialist Party. Those of you who have been here with us for the past some years have been such an instrumental part of this campaign. So we just really want to salute everybody and the chairman who launched this campaign on the day of the attacks, in order for us to bring organization and clarity to this struggle. So I want to salute Chairman Amalia Shatella, the founder of the African People's Socialist Party and the leader of the Global African Revolution, the chairman, as well as our deputy chair, who is a leading member of the African People's Socialist Party and the architect of the Black Power Blueprint, which is the economic development programs, that are helping to build a liberated African economy right in the heart of North St. Louis, one of the most, the most impoverished sector of St. Louis, Missouri. So I want to salute those comrades, who were there, both attacked on July 29, 2022, as a result of their work. As we mentioned, today is the 58th anniversary of the assassination of Martin Luther King, and we also recognize Comrade Bobby Hutton. 2 days later, we heard that speech earlier in today's, webinar, understanding that, even Martin Luther King, came to these conclusions around, what was needed in terms of, the people's understanding about how we fight back against this system of oppression. And it was clear that once he was clear on that, the U.S. government, made its determination and assassinated our dear comrade. So we salute Comrade Martin Luther King, and we also recognize the assassination again as of little Bobby Hutton, 17 years old, in Oakland, California. Just to say that, when we talk about the chairman, they want to say the chairman, was an agent of Russia because he went to Russia, but the chairman's been everywhere. And just to say that, after the assassination of Bobby Hutton, once again, there was this goal to, slander or even know, nothing about this comrade as well. And so the chairman raised up the family of Bobby Hutton, with, working particularly with his aunt. And I know others, maybe Chairman Penny, you may have been around at that time and can say more about that. But, this is, some work that the organization has done to continue to put the people, struggling for the African working class. So I don't know if you wanted to say anything about that, Comrade.
Yes,
Before. Yeah.
I do think that that is really important. This slide and the next slide, Chairman Amalia Shatella raised up the family of Bobby Hutton in Oakland in the 1970s, 1980s. And when the party was based in Oakland, California, when it was a predominantly African city, which has been horribly gentrified, bringing, just the reality of colonialism, moving out up to, I've read at least 10,000 African people forced to leave the city over the years based on the skyrocketing cost of living, the housing, to make it into a gentrified city for the benefit of white people. And the chairman just did a lot to raise that, with the part of the counterinsurgency against the African Revolution of the 1960s. The US government wanted to wipe out the significance of the Huey Newton and the significance of Bobby Hutton. And the chairman raised this up and brought it to the forefront. And next slide, the chairman hosted Huey Newton several times in the Uhuru House in East Oakland, in East Oakland in the 1980s. And this is a picture from the very last public appearance in Oakland in 1989 of the chairman and Huey P. Newton. And right before Huey Newton was assassinated in West Oakland, shortly after that. So the chairman has just always upheld the history of the African working class. And just to say really quickly, when Huey Newton was assassinated, the party played the role, was asked by the family to play the role of honor guard at the funeral home and at the actual funeral itself. And over 10,000 African people, mostly African people in Oakland, lined up blocks, going down blocks to be able to view Huey Newton in, you know, in the funeral home in Oakland, and the party was there. So it was, you know, just the way that the chairman has raised up these struggles and kept it into the power and hands of the African working class. It was an honor to be there, Uhuru.
Uhuru. Thank you, comrade. Yeah, and just, really want to salute, and I even understand the part, printed the programs and just did, just a lot of work on the ground to exonerate the comrade from all the slander. So this is a part of a historical struggle. And so when the African People's Socialist Party was attacked on July 29, 2022, 7 properties, homes and offices were raided in North St. Louis at 5 a.m. and in 6 a.m. in St. Petersburg, Florida. And this is the video that you saw earlier. This is just a snapshot. This was actually outside of the Uhuru House in St. Petersburg, Florida, where, where the party has, institutions like real economic institutions, offices, community offices for our organizers, as well as an opportunity for us to again continue to build our independent African economy, as you see through one of these institutions. And so the case of the Uhuru Three is an important case because, as we understand it, it is a case that has determined and will determine the future of free speech, and again, as a very serious political assault on the struggle for African liberation since the 1960s. We have said it from the beginning, and it was recognized that this was a test case. And again, and it continues to be a test case. This is why this appeal is so important, because again, what the U.S. government tried to do was to, silence and attack and to imprison our leaders just because we are saying things that the U.S. government doesn't like. And we're seeing that happen everywhere on every level. So I want to salute Chairman Amalia Shatella, as well as, other members of the Uhuru Three, Chairwoman Penny Hess of the African People's Solidarity Committee and Comrade Chair Jesse of the Uhuru Solidarity Movement. We have reached countries all around the world, and this is just what we've been able to gather in terms of the data. But support came from literally around the world, a fight for a global anti-colonial free speech movement. And we just want to salute everybody from, you'll see here pictures of comrades in occupied Azania who do have a hands-off Uhuru committee. This is in South Africa. Comrades in West Africa are there too. All throughout the U.S., there's images of us there in New York. And also in London. So this Fightback has been very important, and we have, we called on people a year after the attacks to join us and to build the Hands Off Uhuru, Hands Off Africa Fightback Coalition. And the goal of this was to, build the anti-colonial free speech movement across the political spectrum, inviting individuals and organizations to join this, coalition, this non-sectarian coalition to, unite with to unite with the call to drop the charges against the Uhuru Three and to also fight for, freedom of speech, for all colonized African, indigenous, and non-colonized peoples. And as a part of this process, we want to salute, members of the Fightback Coalition who have also then, been a part of opening and launching the Hands Off Uhuru Latin America Front. This is an important front because what we have done is, continue to make the world smaller in terms of our understanding of, freedom and liberation for, the people of the Americas. Latin America is directly tied to the liberation of Africa and African people. And so we see no separation there. And in fact, we understand that we must organize, in our defense. And so I want to salute, these are just some images of some of the members of the Latin America Committee from our January meeting. We meet monthly, and I want to salute those comrades. And salute the people, who showed up on September 3rd, 2023 for the free speech trial of the century. This is when we showed up in federal court, filled the main room, and even had to have an overflow room. We packed the courthouse, and the people showed up in support of the Uhuru Three. There was a guilty verdict, which is the conspiracy to, the conspiracy charge, which is what we're overturning, but the not guilty verdict that the Uhuru 3 and that, Uhuru does not work for the Russians, that we work for Black people. And so on December 16th, we went back for that sentencing hearing on the guilty verdict, and the judge said not 1 day in prison and no fine for the Uhuru 3, who were looking at up to 5 years in prison and hundreds and thousands of dollars of fines. And so we say victory for all oppressed and colonized people. And we want to salute our brilliant, brilliant, brilliant attorneys who are still with us on today. Attorney Addie Griffin, Mutaki Akbar, Leonard Goodman, Angela Rini, and Tom Inskeep, and salute Comrade Leonard Goodman and who has taken this on pro bono, as well as Attorney Angela Rainey as well. The case of the Uhuru 3, as we, continue to say, is the battle for all anti-colonial free speech, and that it is not over. So the Uhuru 3 appeal, again, comrades, you can mark your calendars for the the week of July 20th. This is when we are expected to be in court for the oral arguments in Atlanta. And so we're going to hear more about that, but we want to just, make that announcement right now. So that's the quick update on the Uhuru 3. I'm going to turn it over to Comrade Penny Hess, who's going to lead us into our next section as we salute the global resistance against the colonial motor production. Uhuru.
Uhuru. Well, we're still on the PowerPoint. I'm sorry.
Yes, Comrade.
Okay.
Yes.
Thank you. So, we say fight colonialism, salute to the global resistance against the colonial mode of production, and to recognize that colonialism is the foreign and alien domination of a people for economic exploitation and political advantage. And its work is always to strip a people of all human and civil rights and rule without regard for law. And recently, and next month, we will have Comrade Afia Ngwanza of the Black is Back Coalition to be able to talk about the recent UN resolution that was very historic, that demands reparations for the enslavement of African people to the continent of Africa, and naming it as the gravest crime against humanity. And this has been the work of Chairman Omali Shatella for 40 years through the first tribunals on reparations to African people, and bringing this question of the enslavement of African people, what is owed. The first tribunal determined that just for the enslavement of African people inside the US alone, that African people were owed $4.1 trillion in 1982 dollars for reparations. So this demand, the chairman was determined to make reparations a household word. Back in the late 70s and early 80s, nobody knew what that meant. There were very few people out there. It was in, just maybe in a certain sector. The chairman brought it to the question and to the ownership of the African working class. And today, the demand for reparations is indeed a household word. There have been reparations initiatives from almost every single city inside the United States to every country, most countries throughout Africa and the Caribbean as well. So this is heard around the world. Next slide. And we want to salute our comrades and supporters from D12 organization who have really fought for and stood with Hands Off Uhuru, Hands Off Africa, all throughout this case and this struggle. And they're calling for people to sign a petition, which we can put in the chat, to endorse for August 29, 2026, a day for reparations and Pan-African solidarity. Uhuru. And by the way, on that resolution for reparations, only the US-backed Israeli state, illegitimate Israeli state, and the government of Argentina in the whole world of all the countries voted against the the resolution on reparations to African people. So we also want to say victory to the people of Iran, U.S., Israel, out of Iran and the Middle East. We want to salute Chairman Omali Shatella. This was his a picture of Chairman Omali Shatella with Iranian students in Gainesville, Florida in 1979, when the chairman and the African People's Socialist Party supported the right of the Iranian people to their own self-determination. There was the U.S., I think under Carter, sent in helicopters to try to attack the heroic taking over of the U.S. Embassy as a den of spies. We're going to be showing a video about that as part of Hands Off Uhuru coming up pretty soon. And the chairman, these are students who were on the front lines of that struggle. The chairman was right there and attacked by white nationalists as he led demonstrations in Gainesville, Florida, in support of the right of self-determination for the people of Iran. So stop, next slide, stop U.S.-Israeli attacks on Iran, victory to the Iranian people. Just yesterday, or a couple of days ago, the crisis of the colonial mode of production deepens. Iran fights back. The U.S. takes down two U.S. military fighter jets over their land. They are resisting. And again, stop U.S.-Israeli assaults on Lebanon and the Middle East. Mwezi, I'm turning it back over to you. You were here in Cuba on this powerful year.
Yes, this was a photo of us outside of the steps of the university, with the U.S. Hands Off Cuba Committee, who was just getting ready to go on their upcoming delegation as well. So I just really want to unite and salute, them and the whole, Cuba Solidarity movement in terms of the understanding, venceremos, and Hands Off Cuba. And so we wanted to salute the U.S. Hands Off Cuba. And many other activists in the Nuestra America convoy, which came with massive resources for Cuba just weeks ago, and to salute the work being done here on the ground, in the United States, in New York. There was a really important call to action Cuba conference that took place March 14th. This is, a part of some of the activities that took place the night before with a delegation of, Cuban women, the, Cuban Women's Mission, who was also there. And you see some of the comrades here holding up the flags. In salute, I want to appreciate Comrades Cesar, Comrade Paulo, and President Yejide of the African National Women's Organization. And, we just want to unite with, the call to stop the U.S. government starvation of Cuba. This is a very serious, if we, really take a moment to, understand that, Cuba has been struggling for decades and, under this, blockade. But now at this point, it is a serious humanitarian crisis, as it has always continued to be. And so this convoy and other delegations are very important. And Cuba is calling on people to come and show your support through material aid that indeed Cuba will institutionalize, because they are in such a dire state right now, and still continuing to fight back. This was just, in terms of Trump tightening, pressure on Cuba, Cuba continues to fight back. You see their Coast Guard boat, which shot down shot at a U.S. boat as well. So just wanted to salute the resistance and the Cuban, revolution, as it's directly tied to what we are seeing in Palestine. So we say victory to Palestine. We have not forgotten about this, because this is, a part of the same struggle that we are indeed, fighting for. So victory to the Palestinian people, all of Palestine, which is their land, and victory to the people of Venezuela, U.S. out of Latin America, free President Maduro and Celia Flores. And I don't know if our comrade is on. I did see him on earlier. I just want to salute Comrade Nkululeko, who is pictured here. He was there on the ground. These are actually snapshots of the video of his statement that was made outside of the court for Maduro and Flores on March 26th. Comrade Nkululeko is on with us today. And I just wanted to see if the comrade had anything to also add in terms of, his experience there on the ground. He was there representing Hands Off Uhuru, representing the Uhuru movement, and we want to appreciate also the Coalition in Defense of Venezuelan Sovereignty, William Camacaro and others who worked with us to, be there, at this really important, hearing for President Maduro and First Lady Flores. So, Comrade Nkululeko, are you there? Let me see.
Yes, Uhuru comrades.
Uhuru, comrade.
Uhuru,
So,
Uhuru.
Uhuru, let me give you a proper introduction as well. Comrade Nkululeko is a leading member of the African People's Socialist Party. He sits on the National Central Committee and leads the Northern region. And so he's here in that capacity as well, because as we talk about building committees and building this work, he plays an important role. So, Uhuru, comrade, thank you for joining us.
No, thank you for having me. Thank you. Hands off Africa, hands off Latin America. Smash colonialism, freedom in our lifetime. I just want to
Yes.
salute the work of salute my leadership chairman Amali Shatella, as well as the work of this committee, and salute all the comrades on the call and everybody watching. Uhuru.
Uhuru. Comrade Nkululeko, can you say a little more about even some of what you, and as we talked about earlier, hearing from Suzanne, and what we continue to do is to call out the illegitimacy of this trial one, but why it was important for us to be there and sum up what is happening.
Yeah, Uhuru. I think it's important we put an African internationalist lens on all of the issues we're confronted with, and we make the connection to how what we see happening in Venezuela, what we see happening to Maduro and his wife, is an extension of the attack of Africa and African people. Same way they kidnapped Maduro, they kidnapped thousands, if not millions, of African people and sentence us to being colonized, sentence us to oppression and exploitation. And what we see today is a continuation of that, because not only was that the basis or the foundation of America or capitalism, that's how America and colonialism maintains itself. So what we see happening to Maduro and people of Venezuela is an extension, is kind of like the same thing happening in real time today, 2026.
Yes, yes.
I
Right
think
on.
it's important. Like, Wall Street is right there. African people were literally kidnapped and brought to New York, and sold to be laborers. Sold to be murderers. Sold to be, build the system. And the U.S. government kidnapped Maduro so that the system can maintain itself at the expense of Venezuela and Venezuelan people. I think it's very important that we stand in solidarity, and that we build a New York front of the Hands of Latin America Committee, so that we can make the connections, because it is it's directly connected, and in order for us to overturn it, we must fight. We must work together. Uhuru.
Uhuru, comrade. Yes, right on. That is African internationalism, and that's the type of analysis that is needed right now in order for us to, not isolate anything that is happening, and to, this is the time that we have to unite. So I just want to appreciate you, comrade, leading the New York front of the African Revolution and the Latin America front of Hands Off Uhuru, and so salute to you, comrade. I'm going to put in the chat a video that comrade, and I want to salute comrade Sister Lisa Davis, because Lisa was there. She's behind the camera. I'm going to put the video in the chat right now. She's the one who was able to capture your statement. And I just want to really salute Vice Chair Lisa Davis, Vice Chair of the Black is Back Coalition for Social Justice, Peace, and Reparations, who is always there, but who was there with you on the ground, as well as other comrades as well. So Uhuru, thank you, Comrade Nkululeko, appreciate you. And I'll turn it back to you, Comrade Chairwoman Penny.
Uhuru, just saluting Nkululeko, and thank you for that powerful report. I want to also, of course, salute the Orinoco Tribune, compañero Jesus Rodriguez Espinoza, who has been on many times with us here on Hands Off Uhuru, Hands Off Africa, on our webinars, and is just, really want to salute them for being on the front lines of the struggle for the people of Venezuela and for the oppressed and colonized peoples on the planet Earth. It's a great newspaper, by the way, and people can go. It does have an online version, and I really urge everybody to go there and check it out. Next slide. And also, Que Viva Puerto Rico Libre. Salute to Puerto Rican independence. Salute to Lolita Lebron and all of the freedom fighters who fought for and gave their lives to the struggle for independence for the colony of Puerto Rico. Next slide. Victory to Mexican indigenous people on their own stolen land, saluting the struggles that erupted that we covered and led by Unión del Barrio several months ago in Los Angeles against ICE. Very, very profound struggle for again, self-determination, for the liberation of the stolen land that belongs to the indigenous people across this stolen border. Next slide. And salute to Unión del Barrio, who also, of course, just have a long time, 40-year fraternal, very, very close relationship with the African People's Socialist Party, and who have been on with us many, many times on this Hands Off Uhuru, Hands Off Africa. Just really want to salute their powerful work. I believe they were on last month. And, just all of the compañeros and all the powerful, powerful work on the stolen land of the indigenous people. Next slide. Victory to African people around the world, inside the US and around the world. I love this picture. This is from the Black is Back demonstration, I believe this past year or the year before. And it just shows the victory of that. And I'm turning it back over to you, Chairman Weezy.
Uhuru, thank you, comrade. And when we say victory to African people in Africa, we recognize that Africa, African people have been dispersed all around the world, and we want to salute our comrades right here. You see Comrade Molefi there on the right, and I want to salute Comrade Chair Tafari, who is the chair of the African People's Socialist Party in South Africa, or as we say, occupied Azania, and to salute to the comrades who have led such a very powerful, really boots on the ground work in, building the Hands Off Uhuru, Hands Off Africa front, from, rap songs to, these comrades are so creative, and this is for them too. And so we just want to salute our comrades on the ground, also our comrades in London. I want to salute Comrade Secretary General Luwezi Kinshasa, who is the director of our international affairs, but also leading Hands Off Uhuru London front. And we'll have SG Luwezi on our next webinar as we talk about the situation in the Sahel and how all of this is directly tied to. So this work is continuing on. And we say victory to African people. We also mean stop the colonial assaults on North St. Louis. What you see here is the destruction, the complete destruction after the May 16th tornado just last year in North St. Louis, and just how the community had to come to its own rescue because the city not only didn't sound the alarm to warn residents, people died, but also had no interest in helping with the cleanup. And this is just some of the results of that tornado. So I want to salute the Black Power Blueprint and the residents of North St. Louis who came together as well. And we say, hands off IET, understanding that when we talk about this attack, Haiti has continued to be punished because of its, beating the ass of the French, the British, the French, the Spanish, and the British, colonizers. And, so we say, long live the Haitian Revolution. And we look forward to, as we talked about other film screenings and other work that we're going to be doing around the question of IET, which is very important. We're able to come to these understandings because Chairman Amalia Shatella has put forward the key understandings of the colonial mode of production. When we can understand this, we can see that everything that is produced for the colonizer comes at the expense of the colonized, whether that's access to wealth, even just the experience of democracy, the ideas in the heads of the colonizers. All of this, grew out of colonialism as its origin. So, understanding that capitalism, was born from the assault on Africa, and required colonialism as its pedestal. There would be no Europe, no America, all of this without colonialism. And so, this is a really important understanding for us to have in this struggle. And so we just want to salute Chairman Amalia Shatella for, keeping that at the forefront, which is why we've been able to be victorious in this struggle as well, because we're not fighting this colonial law, this illegitimate law as it stands on itself. We are fighting, for the material wealth back in the hands of the colonized people. And so, as we move to close our opening PowerPoint, again, we just want to make that major announcement, which you're going to hear coming up right next, about Uhuru 3 returning to court for this landmark free speech showdown, as we're saying. And to remind everybody to continue to go to handsoffuhuru.org/donate. Help us, win the resources for this. Again, free speech is hanging in the balance. As we say, this is the right for all of us to freely speak and to organize in our own interest. So you can help us get there by going to handsoffuhuru.org. Today we have a goal of raising $1,000. I haven't looked to see if we've had any donations come in yet, but I know our moderators will let me know about that as well. And we want everybody to save the date. This is the last part here, to save the date, comrades, for Thursday, April 23rd at 6 p.m. Central, 7 p.m. Eastern, 4 p.m. Pacific, for the meeting that we are calling to build the committees of Hands Off Uhuru, Hands Off Africa. You can register for that meeting now or after today's webinar by going to handsoffuhuru.org/meeting and signing up there so we can get that going as well. So Uhuru comrades, thank you so much for your attention and your engagement in the chat. It's been really great to see everybody who is on. Hopefully I'll get a chance after the next speaker to just salute everybody who has joined us from all over the world on this call. But Chairwoman Penny, I'm gonna bring up our next speaker, which is our dear comrade, Jesse Neville. Comrade Jesse is coming on right now, and he is a member of the African People Solidarity Committee, chair of the Uhuru Solidarity Movement, and wears a really important hat in the struggle for the Hands Off Uhuru, Hands Off Africa counteroffensive, as alongside Comrade Chimarenga leading the work of the Legal Defense Support Committee. So some of that work is to put out, right, like as of today, an announcement about the oral arguments, which will be held in Atlanta. So Comrade, I'm going to turn it over to you, and I know you have some slides as well that you'll be pulling up. So Uhuru, Chair Jesse.
Uhuru, Chair Mwezi, thank you so much. So excited to be here. I'm very honored to be here as well. And yes, thank you for pulling up my slides. Salute to the amazing tech team. So I'm just going to launch right in. This has been a great program so far. As Chair Mwezi mentioned, my name is Jesse Neville, and I am a proud member of the African People Solidarity Committee and honored to be the national chair of the Uhuru Solidarity Movement, our mass organization. We work under the leadership of the African People's Socialist Party, organizing in the white community for reparations to African people. I want to start by saluting my leadership, saluting our leadership, Chairman Amalia Shatella, the leader for all of the oppressed peoples of the world and the leader for us in the white community. And just say that the US government's charge that somehow the Russian government was giving, quote, direction and control, had direction and control over Chairman Amalia Shatella, could not be more outrageously absurd on its face. That's the charge that they cooked up. It is clearly not just a legal charge, but a political charge that they are attempting to make with that. Even the chairman's lawyer, Addie Griffin, after just a few weeks of getting to know the chairman, made the remark that having spent just a little bit of time with him, it was clear to her that the chairman is not taking direction or control from anyone, that such a charge is ridiculous and offensive. So this was not only an attempt to imprison him, but to diminish and degrade the profound influence that the chairman's leadership has had across the planet Earth. We are not going to let them get away with that. And I also want to salute Deputy Chair Onezene Yeshatella, whose brilliant, relentless work to construct the new world, to build the independent African economy, to build African self-government, is negating the colonial system. And this is what the colonial state has tried and failed to destroy. So I want to salute our leadership. I want to thank Suzanne Adelie for that great presentation, the National Lawyers Guild for your longstanding support of the Hands Off Uhuru Fight Back, our amazing chair, Mwezi Odom, for your leadership of the Fight Back Coalition, Chairwoman Penny Hess, for your leadership over not only the Hands Off Uhuru, but also under the party's leadership in building white solidarity with Black Power for 50 years. And just salute all of you in Hands Off Uhuru, Hands Off Africa, every organization, every individual who's a member. Black is back, Impedum, CPI, everybody. The victories I'm about to talk about today are your victories, and it's not over. So let me actually put this little timer on. Okay, so I think I have 20 minutes. I'm gonna stay on that. Okay. All right, so next slide. And before I go into the specifics of the major announcements and updates that I'm excited to bring to you today, I just want to say again, Hands Off Uhuru, Hands Off Africa is amazing. This is such an amazing coalition, such an amazing organization. And I was thinking about something the chairman said last year when there were just an escalation of attacks that were happening on anti-colonial free speech, because the chairman predicted, he said the attack on the Uhuru movement was the canary in the coal mine. And what the chairman said was, when the attacks escalate and the government creates a wider net of repression, with Hands Off Uhuru, the net of repression can serve to connect a greater net of resistance. That's exactly what Hands Off Uhuru, Hands Off Africa is doing. It's bringing all of it together. Anti-colonial free speech, free Maduro, hands off Venezuela, hands off Cuba, hands off Iran. HOU fought for Leonard Peltier, for everyone who comes under attack for anti-colonial free speech, spearheaded by the struggle of African people, who, as the chairman says, have been fighting from day one for freedom through resistance for Uhuru. So as I go into the legal updates, I want to start off by saying that as a consequence of this whole struggle and the leadership of the chairman, I will be starting my first semester in law school to become an anti-colonial movement lawyer this August. But the most important lessons for any aspiring movement lawyer are hard to come by in a law school classroom. And I am very honored and grateful to have been able to learn and continue to learn from the teachings of Chairman Omali Yeshitela. He teaches us you never accept the terms set by the enemy. He shreds the myth of an objective, neutral law bestowed by the gods and instead exposes the law as the opinion of the ruling class, devised by colonizers in a system itself born from mass murder and slavery and genocide. And he teaches from the front lines how to fight, how to win, and has been doing so, going up against the state and winning for more than 50 years. So as the chairman says, this time till it's won. Next slide. Okay, so nearly 4 years ago, after the FBI raided the Uhuru, or nearly 4 years since the FBI raided the Uhuru movement, the Uhuru 3 are going back to court. The stakes could not be higher than they will be in this next battle. We found out last Monday that during the week of July 20th of this year, we will be heading to Atlanta, Georgia. And I mean we, not just the Uhuru 3, all of us are heading to Atlanta, Georgia, where our brilliant legal team will go toe-to-toe with the Department of Justice at an oral arguments hearing before a panel of judges in the 11th Circuit Court of Appeals. This is a landmark appeal with major implications for the First Amendment and for the future of anti-colonial free speech. And I'm gonna breeze through this because so much, go to the next slide, so much has been said already by our MCs, giving you the background, bringing people up to speed on everything that's gone on. But of course, people remember this, the FBI raids on July 29th, 2022. They attacked 7 homes and offices of the Uhuru movement, including the home of Chairman Omali Yeshitela and Deputy Chair Onezene Yeshitela, the Solidarity Center here on Gravois, the home of Penny Hess and Kitty Riley, the home where I live with my wife, Amanda, who's also the vice chair of USM, and the home of Director Akile in St. Petersburg, and the Uhuru House. And you can go to the next slide. So the chairman said from the beginning, this was the canary in the coal mine. And I just put these pictures here to show you that how accurate that statement was. We should never forget that before Trump put armed federal troops on the streets of Minneapolis and throughout this country, Joseph Biden in July of 2022 put armed federal troops in North St. Louis on the streets right outside the chairman's home. So next slide. The chairman and deputy chair that day faced assault rifles and were brandished by federal troops in SWAT gear and were handcuffed at gunpoint. They were told that an indictment would be coming out of Florida later that day. They would read about it in the news. And sure enough, just a few hours later, the Department of Justice unsealed a grand jury indictment of Alexander Ionov, the Russian national who lives in Russia. 4 Uhuru movement leaders and members, including the chairman, Penny Hess, Director Akile, and myself, were at the time characterized as unindicted co-conspirators in a Russian-orchestrated criminal plot to sow discord, weaponizing free speech, as the Department of Justice said at their press conference in St. Petersburg, Florida. Next slide. And 9 months later, finally, in May of 2023, the DOJ released a superseding indictment charging Chairman Omali Yeshitela, Penny Hess, and myself with 2 federal felonies, and we became known as the Uhuru 3. So we were charged with 1 count of violating so-called 18 USC 951. That's the statute name for the foreign agent law that has to do with, quote, acting as a foreign agent of a foreign government without registering with the Attorney General's office. So that charge, you can actually face 10 years in federal prison and a fine of $250,000 for that fine, for that charge. And we were also charged with 1 count of 18 USC 371, which is the general conspiracy statute. So this was basically conspiracy to act as foreign agents of a foreign government without registering with the Attorney General's office. And that charge carried a maximum prison sentence of 5 years and a fine of up to $250,000. So each of the Uhuru 3, as of May of 2023, were facing up to 15 years in federal prison and $500,000 in fines each. This was directed at the primary target, Chairman Omali Yeshitela, the leader of the African Liberation Movement, and the Solidarity Movement was attempt to weaken the strategy of the chairman to build white solidarity with Black power, but they failed. And anyway, we'll say more about that. But these laws that we're talking about, we're going to say more about these laws later on. These laws stem from the 1917 Espionage Act, which was conceived during the height of the African anti-imperialist struggle led by Marcus Garvey, and were created to crush anti-colonial struggle around the world. These laws were used to criminalize constitutionally protected speech by African leaders going back to the 1950s, when W.E.B. Du Bois was charged with almost the exact same charge for supposedly being an unregistered agent of Russia. Next slide. So as people know, the government's story, I mean, you should go back, if you haven't read the original indictment in a while, go back and read it. It makes for it's really quite a read. Just an incredibly absurd piece of like poorly written spy fiction. The narrative is almost laughable if it wasn't so serious what they were attempting to do, alleging that, after fighting for the liberation of his people for over 5 decades, that somehow, sometime around 2014, the chairman decided to begin working as a secret agent for Russia. This is the narrative that the government alleged. And how did they come up with what did they use to back up such an obviously ludicrous and offensive narrative? Well, if you go back, you'll see that the indictment has so-called overt acts that they presented as supposedly examples of things that were done by the quote-unquote co-conspirators to further the conspiracy to violate the law. Every single one of the overt acts was speech, legal, constitutionally protected free speech, writing articles, giving presentations, organizing rallies, hosting Zoom events like the one we're doing right now, participating in conferences, advocating for reparations, opposing U.S. wars, launching a petition to the United Nations to charge the U.S. government with the crime of genocide against African people. Not only was it just speech, it was the exact kind of speech that the chairman and the Uhuru movement have been engaged in for the entirety of their more than 50 years of existence, long before Alexander Ionov had even been born. There were no allegations of spying, no bribery, no fraud, no arms trafficking, no violating sanctions, no passing along government secrets, just words. This is what the chairman said. That's what was in the indictment. Look at this email. Look at this speech. So this is what this was about. It was about the US government wanting to silence the chairman to prevent him from being able to speak and to prevent us from being able to hear him. Next slide. So the chairman immediately launched a fight back. The fight back that you are a part of right at this moment was launched on the steps of the chairman's home the day that he was raided. He started the global anti-colonial free speech fight back. And Hands Off Uhuru, with assistance from and leadership from Director Chimbaranga, who was mentioned earlier, next slide, as well as assistance from forces like the Civil Liberties Defense Center, Lauren Reagan, and the NLG, put together a team of brilliant lawyers, amazing lawyers, Leonard Goodman, Angela Rainey, Addie Griffin, Mutaki Akbar, Tom Inskeep, who were given incredible political education and leadership by Chairman Omalia Shatella, who emphasized from the very beginning that the only way to beat this was to understand that ultimately it had nothing to do with the law, what the law says. He said, this is a political trial. The US government is carrying out a political attack under the cover of law, and therefore it must be met accordingly. So that brings us to how we got to this point that we're at today with having our appeal set for an oral argument in July. This victory, if you go to the next slide, this victory is the product of the chairman's strategy. The brilliant legal team, the incredible support of all of you and thousands of people throughout this campaign, carrying out the strategy laid forward by the leadership of the chairman, who wrote many, many years ago that when he said that the debate cannot be made with this system around the validity of the struggle for Black power. We're not interested in arguing with a judge or a politician about whether or not the revolution is good or bad. What we have to do is deepen the crisis for the system itself. We have to make them deal with the question of democracy. He said, it is our responsibility to make the revolution, make them have to deal with democracy. When I go to court, the chairman said, I'm not arguing about whether the Black revolution is fine. I'm arguing that I have a right to be a revolutionary because they said in their constitution that it's permitted. We're not trying to win judges. We're trying to win the masses. We're not trying to win the state to agree that the revolution is good. We're trying to present it with a contradiction inherent in itself. The masses need to hear this. If you clarify it, that the system must say that democracy is just for white people or not, or continue to pretend that it's for everybody. So the chairman said, what I want them to do is deal with democracy. Don't deal with the revolution. We'll handle that. That's exactly what the chairman did. That's exactly what Hands Off Uhuru did. Go to the next slide. So we put together, the basis for our appeal is contained in the original motion for dismissal that was filed by our attorneys under the lead at that time of Leonard Goodman, who played a leading role in authoring this historic, groundbreaking motion for dismissal. So again, the appeal to overturn the conviction on conspiracy is rooted in many of the arguments made in this original motion for dismissal. And what this motion for dismissal argued is that even if everything in the indictment was true, which it was not, but even if it was, the indictment itself violated the First Amendment. The indictment itself was unconstitutional because this law had never been used, this 951 law had never been used to target pure political speech, where there is no actual conduct being alleged on the part of the people being charged, aside from talking and writing. That's the first time that's ever happened. That is the dangerous precedent that the US government was attempting to establish with this case. And it is a precedent contradicted by more than 8 decades of Supreme Court rulings, as Leonard Goodman points out, that would mean the end of the First Amendment. It would mean the government, if they don't like what you have to say, they can bang down your door, handcuff you, put you on trial. You say, well, all I did was exercise my First Amendment right to speak. All they would have to say is, well, we're accusing you of speaking on behalf of Russia or China or Iran or Venezuela or Cuba or whoever. That's what what they're trying to usher in with the attack on the Uhuru 3 and Chairman Omalia Shatella. So our motion for dismissal argued that this would shred the Constitution to allow this to proceed. And if you go to the next slide, our motion for dismissal was denied. And we went to court in Tampa, Florida for the trial in September of 2024. And the US government thought they were going to put the chairman on trial, but no, the chairman and the Uhuru legal team put them on trial instead. People may remember the US government called 0 actual witnesses. Instead, they called 14 FBI agents who were forced to admit under cross-examination that in all their years of quote unquote investigating and going through however many terabytes of data that they had stolen and raiding all these properties and spying on the chairman, they found 0 evidence whatsoever that the chairman had ever agreed to act under the direction or control of any Russian or anyone else for that matter. They had to admit that because our attorneys put them under fire on the witness stand. They had to admit that the chairman speaks for himself, that his opinions have been consistent for decades, long before these forces in Russia even existed. And they put a 10 million bounty out for anyone who would come forward and try to testify against the Uhuru movement, in other words, to lie. No one did. So this was an amazing trial. It was the free speech trial of the century. And if you go to the next slide, so at trial, how it all turned out was that the jury rejected the foundational charge that the chairman was acting as an agent of a foreign government. As Chair Mwezi said earlier, this meant the jury could see through the lies. They could see that the Uhuru movement works for Black people, not for Russia. But the jury came back with a split verdict, finding the Uhuru 3 guilty of so-called conspiracy, which makes no sense, except for the fact that the US attorneys deliberately resorted to misconduct and lies in their closing arguments and intervened in the jury instructions to make them as misleading and confusing as possible, because it doesn't make sense from a logical standpoint that the jury would say, well, they never acted as Russian agents, therefore they never had an obligation to register with the Attorney General's office, but somehow we conspired to not register with the Attorney General's office that we were acting as Russian agents. It doesn't make any sense. It is what the chairman has said, a thought crime, and it also represents a grave threat to the protection of anti-colonial free speech to allow that conviction to stand. So following the trial, next slide, we were still facing, the chairman and the Uhuru 3 were still facing up to 5 years in prison on the conspiracy charge. The prosecutors practically begged the judge to put the chairman in prison. They wanted to give the chairman essentially a death sentence by putting him in prison. And instead, the judge said, no one's going to prison. No one's getting a fine. He gave the Uhuru 3 years of probation, 300 hours of community service. And earlier this year, our attorneys filed for early termination of probation. The prosecutors objected. They said they shrieked in their motion that the Uhuru 3 continued to be an egregious threat to national security. The judge, who had been checking out the Burning Spear newspaper every night during the trial and looking at the illustrations, courtroom illustrations that were happening, and who had made it clear in the beginning of the trial that he was familiar with the Uhuru movement. He said, here in Tampa Bay area, we call them the Uhurus. He said, no, I don't think they're a danger to society or to themselves. He ended the probation 2 years early. Again, this judge was able to take this stand because the chairman stood up and fought. So now here we are, next slide. We're moving fully into the appellate phase. And this is so exciting. Last year, our appeal was fully briefed in the 11th Circuit Court of Appeals. Thanks to your support, we retained the same fighting legal team to take the fight to the next level. And now we've been granted an oral argument hearing. So this is really historic. This is not a given. The chairman has beaten the odds every step of the way. The US government brags about having a 98% conviction rate. The chairman defied them on that. Most federal criminal cases don't go into an oral argument hearing under appeal. Here we are. The chairman has beat them back once again. And the arguments will be presented again on the same core issues raised in our motion to dismiss, as well as a few other issues. So to give you a little snapshot of what you will experience at the oral arguments hearing, if you go to the next slide, this will be held in Atlanta, Georgia, in the 11th Circuit Federal Court of Appeals. And there will be a panel of judges. There will be 3 judges selected from the overall larger group of judges who constitute the 11th Circuit. And these 3 judges will hear arguments from the attorneys representing the United States government, who, by the way, the White House or Department of Justice appointed somebody in Washington, D.C., a higher up, to take over this case to present the arguments at the appeal. I think that was supposed to, perhaps they thought that might be intimidating, but not at all, because we have an incredible legal team and we're prepared and excited actually to go in and make this happen. So that's going to be, they'll be presenting the arguments before the panel of judges, and then they'll be taking questions. The judges will start, launching questions at both sides to gain a better understanding of the case and the issues and things like that. So, so again, the arguments presented at the appeal include, one, the First Amendment, that this prosecution violates the First Amendment because it's based entirely on speech, that this would create a chilling effect on speech to require people to register before they're allowed to talk, for one, and that you can't strip speech of constitutional protection by labeling it propaganda and disinformation. But our appeal also directly challenges the conspiracy conviction, because as our attorneys argued during the trial, the idea of conspiracy, which the conspiracy law itself is a thought crime and is something used by prosecutors to convict people when they have zero evidence whatsoever that they actually did anything. But even according to their law, a conspiracy requires that the people involved knowingly and willfully make an agreement to violate a law, to commit a so-called crime. In our case, the government produced no evidence that the Uhuru 3 had any knowledge of a foreign agent registration requirement. So again, the law they claim that the Uhuru 3 conspired to violate is one that there was no evidence the Uhuru 3 knew existed. And how can you knowingly and willfully conspire to break a law that you don't know exists? And even the judge at trial said he was troubled by this. He even put that in writing after the verdict came down, and he signaled openly during the trial that he foresaw a strong possibility that this question could result in the conviction being reversed on appeal. So this appeal, next slide, is so important because this is where a binding precedent gets established. This is where a ruling from the 11th Circuit can determine how these laws will be used going forward. And a victory in our appeal would establish as case law that the government violates the First Amendment anytime they criminalize speech simply by accusing the speaker of being a foreign agent. That doesn't mean they're not going to try to do it again, but it means that the people's struggle will have a strong weapon in their arsenal in the hands of a victory in this appeal. So we are urgently raising $10,000 now to fund this critical phase of the fight for legal fees that will make it possible to fight this case at the highest level, to prepare for the oral arguments, and to mobilize the people to show up in court. Oral arguments are set. Now we have to win. We need $10,000 urgently to cover legal costs and mobilize for court. And you can go to handsoffahuru.org/donate to do that. And just to wrap up, I think I'm at time. So just to wrap up, at the same time that the legal fight back continues, the chairman reminds us that the political question remains the key question. And what gives us a better possibility to win in the courts is the work that we do in the streets. So at the same time that we are moving forward with the appeal, we are moving forward with our political campaign to repeal the Foreign Agent Registration Act, to repeal the conspiracy laws that are used to silence and attack anti-colonial free speech. Next slide. Actually, you can go 2 slides up now. There you go. So you can take action today by distributing posters and flyers for the anti-FARA campaign in your community. Next slide. You can use social media to organize other people that you know or don't know to get involved in this campaign. We have an informational series of slides at handsoffahuru.org/outreach that lay out all of the key points and demands of the anti-FARA campaign. We're calling on everyone to think about organizing a forum, a rally, or a teach-in, next slide, in your community to spread the word and build a people's movement to overturn these repressive, anti-democratic colonial laws. Again, you can go to handsoffahuru.org/outreach, or let us know in the chat if you're ready to get active where you are to build this campaign. And next slide. This is also important because these laws are coming to a state near you if they're not already. This is a federal law, but now states throughout the country are creating their own state level foreign agent registration laws to have yet another layer of repression in the machinery of the colonial state to attack anti-colonial free speech. So we want to be on top of this. We want to be opposing this. We want to be using this to build the anti-colonial free speech fight back. And finally, if you go to the next slide. Okay, so we are talking about building local committees, and Chair Mwezi and Chairwoman Penny mentioned this. You can build a local HOU committee where you are, Hands Off Uhuru, Hands Off Africa Fight Back Committee, and your committee can get started doing anti-FARA campaign outreach, events, and actions, holding fundraisers for the legal defense, and mobilizing to pack the court at the oral arguments hearing in Atlanta in July of 2026. And go to the last slide. So I just want to say that it's not over. Under the courageous leadership of Chairman Amalia Shatella, we're taking this all the way to the streets, to the courts. We will win. We are winning. Hands off Uhuru, hands off Africa.
Africa. Uhuru. Uhuru, comrade. Wow, thank you so much, Chair Jesse, for that great overview. Really important, presentation, just always very dynamic. And, you had some throwbacks in there, some of the sketches even from the trial. And it was just really, important for us to continue to lay out the, ongoing, ludicrous, ness of this case, but also the seriousness of it. But how important it is for us to understand that we can and we will win. And so I just really want to salute your contributions to this work, comrade, on this front, but also, leading the, solidarity movement as well, as it relates to, why they also, have two members of, two of our solidarity members who are part of the Uhuru Three was to also scare white people into uniting with the struggle for Africa and African people. So salute to you, comrade, as well. And just wanted to say there's some questions that I think one person had their hand up. I think that's you, Comrade Esther. And I see a question in the Q&A from Rachel. Thank you for using that as well. We are going to get to questions in a moment after our next presentation and after we just kind of sum up how much we've raised on today. So if you can hold your questions and hold your hands, we appreciate that, comrades. And we're so glad that you joined us as well. And I just want to give a quick shout out before we bring up our next speaker. I want to give a quick shout out to people who are tuning in. I want to salute comrades who are tuning in from Hawaii. I want to salute Richard, Janet in Washington, Paulette in Atlanta, Jackie in Massachusetts, I believe. Maybe I got that wrong. But also Lisa in New Jersey, Ecuador. We have Comrade Ann. Baltimore, we have Mike. California, Carpani. Great to see you, comrade. In St. Louis, we got Ruby. We got Brendan. Salute to you, comrades. Comrade Osaheni, also welcome. Julian, you've been very active in the chat. It's great to see you on as well. And thank you, Comrade Rachel, for joining us. Esther, it's always great to have you on. Comrade John McCarthy, want to salute you. And also those who are joining us on YouTube, Comrades Kitty, Sandy, Comrade Jainaba, and several others. So thank you, everybody who's joined us. And we are going to move to our next speaker, but I want to announce how much we've raised so far because we haven't had a chance to check in. I want to salute everybody who has already gone to handsoffuhuru.org/donate. I just want to run off your names and we're going to, thank you for your total amounts. But so far we have raised, comrades, $880 of our $1,000 goal. We have $120 left to go. I want to salute and thank Michael for your donation. Thank you, Robert. Thank you, Allison, Julian. Thank you, Ruby, and Esther. Thank you, Brendan, Robert. Thank you to an anonymous donor, as well as thank you, Comrade Lisa, Johan, Jeffrey, and Jan. And I see a pledge in the chat from Comrade MQ. Thank you, comrade, so much. So we look forward to saying how we've raised our goal and possibly doubled our goal on today's webinar. So comrades, thank you so much for all of that and for being on with us so far. So I just want to take a moment to introduce our next speaker. I want to introduce Chairman Amalia Shatella. For more than 50 years, Omalia Shatella, our chairman, has been, relentless in upholding the leadership of the African working class. Is the chairman of the African People's Socialist Party and the African Socialist International and leader of the African Nation, and has built a worldwide organization of African workers, African socialists, who are, African internationalists, carrying on his shoulder the legacy of the great Marcus Garvey, and the ambitious demand for the total liberation of Africa and African people in his lifetime, and a return to all of our, stolen resources that belong to African people. I just really want to say that having the chairman, here with us to bring this analysis in terms of, why it's important that we mobilize for the oral arguments, but also why you should too be a part of Hands Off Uhuru, Hands Off Africa as it relates to your attack on freedom of speech. I just want to really salute Chairman Amalia Shatella, who is on the ground in St. Louis. And let me see, I can't see the chairman, but tell me if he's on or not on. And also to say that, part of what the work that the chairman has done over the years is, is an opportunity for us to understand that, when we struggle for Black power, this struggle as it relates to the African liberation movement, we are struggling for that same effort to free up the whole world. And so I want to welcome on Chairman Amalia Shatella, Uhuru Chairman.
Uhuru.
Uhuru.
Thank you so very much, Comrade Chair Mwezi, for the introduction. I would like to express my appreciation to everyone who has come on. I want to start with the self-criticism and I hope I'm not considered rude. I won't be able to acknowledge so many of the wonderful people who are in this meeting, who are responsible for every victory that we've experienced up to now. We've always said it's a political struggle we were involved in and not as essentially a legal question, except that we had to build the political basis for forcing the system to respond to what it has identified as constitutional legality. So we appreciate you so much. And the reason I'm not going to spend as much time as I need to acknowledging you all, so many of you, we've had such an extraordinary and sometimes very long relationships. And even though we start off saying that and recognizing that these relationships is based on actual political issues and ideological questions that we're confronted with, we recognize also that the political struggles that we're involved in contributes to a real deep and profound feelings, subjective feelings as well. To quote Che Guevara, at the risk of sounding ridiculous, I have to confess that revolutionaries are motivated by great feelings of love. And I think that is something that we experience collectively here. So I wanted to acknowledge that. And also to say that there's so much that needs to be said to get to the strategical questions we're involved in. African People's Socialist Party and the Uhuru movement, we're not a protest movement as such, though we engage in protest quite seriously and what have you, but we engage in protests to advance the struggle of liberation. So that's what we are. We're an organization about the total and absolute unconditional liberation of African people, which is a critical question. And I think it's one that everyone in the world should recognize as critical. And at one time in history, it was recognized as a critical question. In fact, in the 1920s, the Soviet Union was able to say and recognize that African people's struggle inside the United States was a struggle for national liberation, and that it was the strategic leadership of the struggle for national liberation of the peoples around the world. That was true then, it's true now. So I want to be able to call on everyone here to participate, to come to St. Louis, Missouri for the 3 days of April 17th, 18th, and 19th. That's when we hold our plenary. this will give us an opportunity to have deeper, more profound discussions around the strategic basis, the whole question of what it is we're involved in terms of a struggle. Take it out of this immediate situation that some people will be locked in and not able to see the historical basis of the struggle we're involved in. There has to be a question of why all the white people who love us, for example, and can love us in this situation, at least as it relates to fighting against what the court system has done to us. But when Malcolm X was killed, we didn't see movements of white leftists or white people, et cetera, struggling in opposition to the murder of Malcolm X. Same thing was true even with Martin Luther King, who white people declared they loved so much, yet there was Africans who were alone in Washington, D.C., engaging in struggle that was so intense that the United States had to surround the White House with tanks because they didn't understand how deep our capacity was in terms of fighting against this system. So, and that was true of so many times, so many, Carl Hampton in Houston, Texas, the murder, brutality that Africans have experienced. And we still, when we listen to people from the left who talk about the struggle of African people historically, they don't mention Marcus Garvey. They don't mention Malcolm X. And these are forces they don't mention. They don't even really mention the Black Panther Party, these were critical forces. But the thing that distinguishes them is that they were people who recognized that our struggle was bigger than some right to pursue the same aims and to integrate into the system of the colonial project itself. Our struggle, and all of the people I just mentioned were engaged in a fight, a struggle to extricate ourselves from the colonial project, to be a free people, to be an independent people, to be a people capable of defining our own reality for ourselves, feed, clothing, and housing ourselves. That's the struggle against colonialism. And that's the demand that we make. We call on everybody. We recognize a strategic interest even in this meeting. The question has been posed, well, where do we go from here? And the reason we have to answer this question is not simply because we object to what they've done to Comrade President Maduro and the first combatant Celia Flores. It's because there's a limitation of what we understand the struggle is all about. It's not simply about Venezuela. Venezuela came into existence as a consequence of the attack on Africa. 600 years now, African people in Africa and here have been fighting against this system that has come into existence as a consequence of the attack by Portugal initially on Africa, looking for all kinds of resources, etc., inventing lies and tales about why it was that they came to Africa in the first place, including such nonsense is that they just had a surplus of a civilization and a surplus of Christianity that they had to share with the rest of the world, and based on that lie, the lie that they had to assume they assumed the responsibility of the white man's burden. They didn't want to go to these places and do the things they've done to us, but they had a responsibility because they had all this civilization, they had all of this Christianity, and they had to share it with we who were not blessed to have their presence and to have what it is that they have to offer. So this is part of the distorted history that has been passed down, and that has even today contributes to how people understand the world and how people understand Africa and African people and our role in the world. This is how it contributes to how people understand the fact that what has happened to the indigenous people of this territory, this land, that they now call America. And I mean all the indigenous people. I'm talking about the people that characterize as Mexicans. I'm talking about the First Nation people, etc., whose land was taken. And this is critical, because if you don't recognize this, then you talk about you want to support the people in Africa, people in Palestine, without recognizing that Israel is a settler state. Well, if Israel is a settler state because it came and took the people's land, took the people's resources, and reduced them to a bestial kind of existence where they have no rights, then you have to recognize that America is a settler state. It's a settler state, a settler colony, where they came, where Europeans did come here and steal the land from the people and put them in concentration camps that they still refer euphemistically as Indian reservations. And what they have done to African people is just critical that we understand this, that we get to the essence of what the question is. And if we get to the essence of the question, we're saying that the world economy as we experience it today, even though we don't recognize it, don't call it a world economy, we just talk about the economy that's happening in the various places that we are located, but there is a global economy. And this world economy came into existence as a consequence of the attack on Africa. And from this attack on Africa, the forced dispersal of African people around the world. That's where the place like Venezuela came from. Was no Venezuela before the attack on Africa and the dispersal of Africa. There was no Haiti, was no Jamaica, was no America. All of these, and was no Europe. All of these places came into existence as a consequence of the attack that was made on Africa. And this is something critical for us to understand. If you understand that, you understand that it's all interconnected. So we don't have to see the struggle as a war that's being made against the people in Venezuela as one war. Comrade Nkululeko mentioned how what is happening to the president of Venezuela, what happens to the first combatant, Celio Flores, is something that African people are so familiar with because it's happening to us. And the fact of the matter is that a third of the African population was murdered during the high tide of the attack on Africa. Of the 600,000 people in Africa at the time, something like 200,000 of us were killed in this process. And this is what we're looking at in terms of how this whole system came into existence. That's why you see every place in the world where there is this struggle, this crisis, where this government and all the other colonial powers are making war, is places that's come under colonial domination, white power domination. And I say white because that's how the people who attacked us defined themselves. I didn't create whiteness. They created whiteness. They defined themselves as such. The Europeans did this. This is relevant. And this is not a blame thing I'm talking about. I'm talking now about understanding what the contradiction is so that we know what it is we have to do. So where do we go from here? One thing that we have to do to go from here, this has been a strategic objective we've established for ourselves in the African People's Socialist Party such a long time ago, is to win this recognition that African people in this country are a colonized people, that we are colonizing, that our struggle is for self-determination, self-government, the same thing that all dignified people fight for all around the world, and generally speaking is recognized as a legitimate struggle. And this is what we are about. And what does that mean? That means that you support the efforts of the African people to liberate ourselves. You support the projects, the anti-colonial projects that we've established in places inside the United States. And right now, particularly, because if the U.S. had to fight, all of us had to struggle against everybody, against colonialism inside this country, then they wouldn't have the resources to be able to be exporting terror against the peoples of the world. But it's only because they don't have to defend themselves from colonial resistance that's generalized here in the United States that African people have been left on our own, generally speaking, with the exception, of course, of the indigenous people here. The exception, which includes the Mexican people and the forces that we've won from the colonizers' population themselves to be work in solidarity with us, with this struggle. This is not just a struggle because we are treated badly, the poor Negroes are treated badly. It's recognition that African people, like everybody else, we have a right to be a self-governing, self-determining people to determine the future of our children ourselves. And that's what this struggle is all about. So this is what the call is. This is what you have to do. Support the Black Power Blueprint. Come to the plenary so that we can have a deeper discussion where people from all around this country will be participating, and all around the world will be participating in some
fashion or another. And that plenary, again, is going to be in St. Louis, Missouri, the 17th, 18th, and 19th of April. You should be here. You should go to apspplenary.org to be able to get more information about the plenary. So I'm hoping that you'll do that. And I want to remind everybody here that it's only recently, within the last period, in this assassination of Dr. Martin Luther King, was one of the more recent acts that was committed against our struggle to take us off of the agenda, to take the struggle of liberation of African people off the agenda. People can talk about King and the fact that he loved everybody, said love everybody, etc. But King was there in Ghana at the first independence. When Nkrumah declared independence in Ghana, King was there. King recognized the relationship that African people in this country had to the struggle of African people around the world. And if he didn't want to do it, he had to do it. He had to do it because what was happening with Africans in this country, the Black Panther Party recognized it, Malcolm X recognized it, and this was the trend that was developing inside this country and outside this country. We remember they killed King in 1968. 1965, they had murdered Malcolm X. 1961, they had murdered Patrice Lumumba. And in 1969, of course, they attacked the Africans, the conspiracy, the so-called New York 21 case. And that same year, they murdered Fred Hampton. There's a whole campaign of murder against the anti-colonial forces here, because this is the critical question for all of us and for everybody who's interested in ending this relationship, this horrible, repressive relationship. In reality, you have to unite with the struggle of African people. I want to remind everybody that of Bandung, the Bandung Conference in the 1950s, where colonized people from all over the world came to Bandung, Indonesia. And of course, I will remind you that what happened with that is 1960 or 61, something to that effect. The U.S. government participated, facilitated this, the CIA did, in the murder of a million of Indonesians who were participating in the struggle against colonialism. Bandung Conference was something that people from all around the world, African, Asians, came together to put together a strategy against colonialism. 1967, even after the murder of the people in Bandung, it happened in 1961. 1967, you had the movement, the meeting that happened in Cuba, where people from around the world came. And they created what was called the Organization of Solidarity of African, Asian, and Latin America. It was an anti-colonial movement that mobilized oppressed peoples all around the world. This is the critical question, has always been the critical question. This is the foundation upon which all the capitalist system and exploitation and oppression rests for everybody in the whole world. So what we're saying is that colonialism is a mode of production. It's not simply a policy by a particular government, not a policy, if you will, by Israel against Palestinians. It's not just a policy. It is a colonial mode of production. It is a parasitic colonial mode of production. It was born as a colonial mode of production, and it will have to be destroyed as a colonial mode of production. If we understand the colonial mode of production, then we understand the basis of the unity between the people of Palestine, the people of Venezuela, the people of St. Louis, Missouri, the people of Cuba, etc. It's one struggle that we're involved in against a parasite. And central to that struggle is the liberation of Africa, where you've got a whole more than 1.5 billion people who live under some form of colonial domination, who've been dispersed all around the world. It's a critical question because we are everywhere. African people are. And united, we have the ability to fight against this oppression, this exploitation, and it's the responsibility of everybody who loves freedom, who claim to love Black people, etc., and don't want to see us oppressed, don't want to see us awakened in the middle of the night by tanks and things like that, to unite with us in overturning this relationship. Unite with the colonized, because that's where liberty is located. And don't be so afraid that you will lose what people like to refer to as white privilege. Well, it's colonialism. It's colonial privileges. And the fact is that everything that that Europeans have in the world, and especially inside the United States, relies on a continuing existence of this mode of production. And if it's trouble right now, at any given moment, it's because of the resistance of the oppressed, whether that's Venezuela, whether that's Palestine, whether that's St. Louis, whether it's Cuba, etc. That's the thing that disturbs the status quo. Look out for the election that's happening in Ecuador. This is an important election. I just wanted to pass that on as something that we need to be talking about, because that's another point of oppression. I said Ecuador, but also Peru. It's what I'm thinking about as well. So I just wanted to say those things and express my appreciation to everybody who is here. And just to say, there are three critical things. One, the U.S. domestic colonialism that involves African people. U.S. as a settler colony that's stolen the land of the indigenous people and colonized Africans domestically here. Two, that there is a colonial mode of production, and that is now being shredded by the resistance of the peoples around the world, and that you must support this resistance, and that you have to support the African People's Socialist Party and the Uhuru movement that's involved in the practical campaigns and struggles against the colonial mode of production and colonialism itself. And this way we win, and that's what it's about. So we unite with everything that's been talked about in terms of fighting back at this moment. Do everything we can to fight back at this moment, to fight demand that the Comrade Maduro and first combatant be returned to Venezuela. Do what we can to expose all of that. That's critical kind of work that we have to do, but do it also in the process of uniting with the struggle of colonized people right here in this country. And I say this country, I mean the United States, and specifically the African people who are colonized in this country, and specifically the African People's Socialist Party and the Uhuru movement that's actively engaged in creating anti-colonial projects designed to undermine this whole relationship that we have. If you do this, then you have driven a stake into the heart of this most voracious colonizers that's oppressing peoples all around the world. Uhuru.
Uhuru, Chairman. Yes, just wanted to unite with just that last call that, if you want to see all the oppression, any type of oppression, and in this, in this lifetime, you have to get behind this struggle, to overturn colonialism and the verdict of colonialism on our lives. And just really want to salute that presentation, Chairman. There's, some other questions that have come through even just through your presentation. So I hope we can we will get to those very soon. But I just wanted to unite with the call to, to join this fight back, join this struggle, and indeed, comrades, we will win. So, Uhuru, Chairman, I really want to salute you and the party's history, and we will win. And I'm trying to see if I can come back onto this program here because, and the Chairman, I hope you will, I'm sure you will stay on with us for Q&A as well. And great, Uhuru. And I do want to bring up our comrade who is the chair of our fundraising committee, Chair Amanda Carlozzi, who was also, there at ground zero with the, with the FBI raids in the Solidarity Center in the apartment above, as mentioned earlier. Really want to salute this comrade for your work and the whole fundraising committee, to help us bring, transparency to the process of raising the resources for the legal fight back. And I know you have an exciting update about our fundraising goal on today. So Uhuru, Amanda, great to see you, comrade. Uhuru.
Here, Moisey, really appreciate this webinar so far. Want to really appreciate the chairman's presentation that was just given, and I completely unite. We are winning. African people will win, and also appreciate the presentation that Comrade Chair Jesse gave about the significance of the oral arguments. And I will not be able to say it any better in this presentation. We have very simple slides here for the this part of the program, but before we get to that, or while they're being pulled up, I want to really appreciate everybody who has contributed today. And we have Mike, who gave 40, Robert G, who gave 25, Allison, who gave 50, Julian, who gave 40, Ruby, who gave 40. We have a pledge from Anne for 100, a pledge from Esther for 100. Brendan gave 40, Robert B gave 20, an anonymous person gave $100. Lisa W gave 25. We got 50 from Johan, and then also 50 from Johan's father, John. Jeffrey gave 100. Jan gave 100. MQ pledged 40. Susan gave 100. Maureen gave 50. Janet gave 20. And then we have a $250 contribution from Mauricio today. And that, I know, Mauricio, you were on last week and also gave to the oral arguments as well. So out of our, what we were planning to raise today, we have raised $1,340. So I just want to really appreciate all of you and really salute your ongoing commitment to this fight back. So I believe we have the slides, and we can pull those up. Again, they're very simple, but again, go to handsoffforwho.org/donate. We have a goal for the oral arguments to raise $10,000, and we are chipping away at that. We raised about $1,300 this week. We raised about $1,600 last week. But we want to pay the lawyers as soon as we possibly can. We want to just, bring these resources in, pay the lawyers, have them be secured. I don't think those are the right slides, but that's okay. We don't have to go through them. But yeah, please, keep contributing. There are, a significant amount of people on this webinar today. If everybody gave, if everyone gave like Mauricio did and gave 250, I'm confident that we can bring in all the resources needed for this appeal. And I just want to see, now if anybody wants to match them. I know this is a webinar, so you can't actually speak, but feel free to raise your hands. And Chairwoman Penny is going to give 100. So Uhuru, Chairwoman Penny, that is bringing us to 1,440. And let me just see here. Uhuru. Okay, Uhuru. Yes, thank you. Okay, they are. Wonderful. All right, we can go to the next slide here. The fight continues. Again, go to handsoffforwho.org/donate to contribute to, next slide here, the $10,000 needed to cover oral arguments fees. We can go to the next slide here. There are many ways to give. So when you go to the website, it will prompt you how to pay. You can pay by card, directly with a bank transfer, PayPal, donor advised funds. That is, some people have funds saved in an account that needs to go to a 501c3 nonprofit, and Hands Off Uhuru, Hands Off Africa is that sort of organization. So those can be accepted. Cryptocurrencies, stock, Venmo, if you have Venmo, money sitting in your Venmo account that you want to contribute to this, that is a possibility. And we do also accept checks. And we did receive a check last week as well. And I'm going to pull up that person's name in just a second. But that is an option. And I appreciate the people that are moving forward with that form of contributing. So we did receive that, and I will find their name in just a second. But we can go to the next slide here. So again, like Chair Jesse said, this is about defending the right to anti-colonial free speech in a higher court. We can go to the next slide. And again, I'm glad we spent more time on this in this webinar. This is going to be a victory for free speech for everybody. So when we contribute today at handsoffforwho.org/donate, we are contributing to this landmark precedent that is going to be set in the court. And I believe it was mentioned, but, being granted oral arguments is a victory in itself. It's a statement that says that the arguments being put out in the appeal by our legal team, by Hands Off Uhuru, put forth by the chairman are, according to the courts, significant enough to be able to present them in this fashion. And it's a step forward towards a full and complete victory. So it's very significant that we're at this stage. We can go to the next slide here. And again, we just cannot emphasize enough how significant all of you, people that are not, tuning in today, people that may be watching this later, how significant your support is to this fight back. We would not have been able to do it without your ongoing support, both, like we said, financially, towards the legal fees and, travel costs and other costs and things like that, but also actually being there at the trial. So I'm excited to see all of you again at the oral arguments in Atlanta. We can go to the next slide here. And just, to put it in perspective, over 500,000 was raised to go to the trial and win. And then we also received, on top of that, the pro bono contributions from attorney Larry Goodman and now also attorney Angela Rainey. $60,000 was already raised and paid to retain the legal team to file the appeal and the work involved in that. So raising $10,000, I'm 100% confident we can do that with your ongoing support. We can go to the next slide here. Just want to again salute the legal team, attorneys Mutaki Akbar, Addie Griffin, Tom Inskeep, Leonard Goodman, Angela Rainey. We can go to the next slide here. And looks like, so yes, we got the $100 donation from Comrade Penny Hess. And we can go to the last slide, and then I will close out. So together we will win. Continue donating during the rest of this webinar. If you're watching this later, contribute. And I want to really call on everybody to share this call with the people around you, your friends, your family, your coworkers. That is what we did from the very beginning, calling on support of the people that we know that care about free speech, that care about ending colonialism. This is a very critical fight in that arena. So I just want to call on all of you to share. You can share this webinar. It will be live on YouTube. You can also just share them the link, handsoffuhuru.org/donate, and make your own personal appeals to the people in your circle. I love when we see new names come through as donations. That means that all of you that are attending these webinars are going out and spreading the significance of this. So we really appreciate that as well. So Uhuru, I know that we will win.
Uhuru, comrade, indeed we will. And this is today's webinar, and the resources and just all the contributions is evidence of that. So thank you so much, Comrade Amanda, for that overview and update. So far, I'll just repeat one more time. We have raised a total of $1,440 on today's webinar. We want to encourage people to keep going. Let's bring it to 1,500 or more, comrades. If we can double that, let's do it. So Uhuru, to everybody who has donated, thank you so much. And for those of you watching on YouTube and on our other social medias, yes, please share, get this out there, as we had important updates on today's webinar as well. So Uhuru, just now to come back towards the last, closing parts of today's webinar, we wanted to open it up for Q&A, to some of the questions that have been raised already in the Q&A chat, as well as I see one hand raised. Then we'll go to announcements and we'll close. And so I'd like to first read the two questions that are in the Q&A, and then I'll turn it over to Comrade Esther, who has had her hand up. I just want to read these two questions, and then I'd like to open it up to our panelists and participants to respond. So one of the questions that came on, actually there's a third question, so I'll read those, and then Esther, I'll turn it to you. So we have a question here from Rachel Barr. Thank you, Rachel, for joining us. This was raised during the presentation by Comrade Jesse around the appeal. And the question from Rachel says, is this the same thing as sedition? So and you could look up the definition for that, but it was just regarding, the conviction of the Uhuru 3. So, Chair Jesse, perhaps that question can go to you. Another question was raised by Comrade Paulo Cruz Alegui, who is, founder of Los Ronderos de los Redes and a, honored member of the Hands Off Uhuru, Hands Off Africa Fightback Coalition. Paulo writes, Uhuru comrades, excellent presentation. He says, salute to the chairman's leadership and political clarity that allow the anti-colonial free speech movement to keep on winning. What does the Uhuru 3 make of the internal struggle within the Trump administration, which led to the firing of Attorney General Pam Bondi and possibly more officials soon, as such as FBI Director Kash Patel? And does the interim Attorney General Todd Blanche change the federal, government's legal strategy in the oral arguments in any way? Thank you for that question, Paulo. And then the other question here raised was from Jackie Devono. And Jackie asked, when is the next court date? And I see Jesse Neville is typing an answer. So, and just for everybody, we're going to be back in court the week of July 20th. And we'll have more information coming out about that. But thank you, Karma Jesse, for taking on that question. So since we have those questions kind of typed there for reference, I'd like to also turn it to you, Comrade Esther. You've had your hand raised, and I just want to appreciate you for being on. And if we can, we probably have to do some tech stuff on the back to get you to speak. So let me see if I can work on that as well. Or maybe our text can help if Esther is still there, which you are because your hand is up. So let's see here. Esther, are you able to unmute or? Yeah, unmute. Let me see if I can promote you to panelist. Okay, so Esther, if you're still at your computer, this is your opportunity to ask your question. And let's see. Okay, I'm just going to prompt you to unmute. And if you're not there, then we'll go to the other questions as well. And if I've missed any other questions in the chat, or chat moderator, please let me know. Thank you, engineer, for letting me know, Esther. Okay, so I think Esther's not in place right now to answer that question. I just saw a message. Okay, so let's continue. But thank you, Esther, for being on, Comrade Uhuru. So okay, let's go back. So Chair Jesse, what can you say, or Chairman Penny, about the question raised by Rachel Barr? Is this the same as sedition? Which which is defined as, I can just read it, conduct or speech initiating or inciting people to rebel against the authority of a state or monarch.
Uhuru, yeah, I can say something about that. But yeah, the chairman may want to do so as well if the chairman is still on. Uhuru, yes. So it's definitely related. I mentioned earlier the Espionage Act of 1917, and the most recent iteration of a sedition law in the United States was the Sedition Act of 1918, which was an expansion upon the Espionage Act. And the significance here is what the chairman has explained about these laws. All laws are ultimately political, and law is the opinion of the ruling class, and therefore all laws under colonialism exist to preserve the order and stability of the colonial system. These laws in particular are explicitly political laws. They barely make any effort to pretend that they're about anything else. And the law that was used against the chairman and the Uhuru Three, the 18 USC 951, before it was created as its own statute, most of the language in that law was contained within the Espionage Act of 1917. I think the only difference was that at the time it said that persons acting as unregistered foreign agents needed to register with the State Department or something like that. But they ended up extracting it and turning it into its own law. So it emerges out of that same process. The Espionage Act, the Sedition Act, these laws that were created explicitly to target political speech. The Sedition Act, actually over 1,000 people were convicted under the Sedition Act for criticizing the First Imperialist War and the U.S. involvement in the First Imperialist War. This was under Woodrow Wilson, who the chairman has also told us a lot about the history of that period. And I guess the main thing I would wrap this up with is that what the chairman helps illuminate about that whole time period is that while you often hear about people like Eugene Debs and these kind of white left socialists who came under attack under the Sedition Act, the context in which that kind of closure of democratic space was happening was anti-colonial struggle that was rocking the foundation of the entire colonial system, both inside U.S. borders, as exemplified by the movement led by Marcus Garvey, that was the most significant African anti-imperialist movement in history that was emerging at that time. In 1917, you have the East St. Louis massacre, with where Garvey really rose to prominence, and you have struggles all around the world in Nicaragua, Sandino, in India, anti-colonial struggles in India, and in Haiti. This was a few years after the U.S. government, the U.S. Marines invaded Haiti. So this was like the time period in which this happened. The Mexican struggle, all of these things were on fire. And it was in that context that these laws were created to try to crush that, and along the way to take away any semblance of so-called freedom of speech and First Amendment rights for anyone. So they're very much connected in that way. This attack and the laws used in this attack flows from that same history of colonial laws going back to the Espionage Act and the Sedition Act that came shortly after. Uhuru.
Uhuru, comrade, thank you for that response. And thank you, Rachel, for that question. Let me see, was there another response to that? Uhuru, Chairman.
Uhuru, I think it's important to, I really appreciate what Comrade Jesse has said. I think it's important also to recognize that much of the terror waged against African people was not done within the context of law, as we have come to understand it. And when Comrade Jesse mentioned, the Red Summer, what they did in East St. Louis and bombing Tulsa, Oklahoma, Rosewood, et cetera, happening around the same time frame. It wasn't said that the people were violating a law, except they might pick an individual to start the thing, but they bombed entire communities, burned entire communities, killed masses of people and what have you. So it wasn't, in many ways, the fight for democracy was something, in quotes, that brought us to a place where lynchings happened legally. It was within the context of the law. I think it's really important to recognize that the terror waged against colonized people at one junction law wasn't even a consideration. And even when we look at 1791 is when the Bill of Rights was ratified by the United States Congress. Freedom of assembly, freedom of speech, freedom of association, et cetera, et cetera. Well, Africans were property at that time. So clearly, those were not laws that were made for us. It was laws that effectively was made by European settlers who were determined to establish a system where they would not be affected by kings, no kings, et cetera, kind of stuff. And these laws were made for them, not for us. Had nothing to do with us. And this is why we continue to say that some white people don't understand that Africans, of course, had the greater incentive than anybody to fight for free speech. We the ones who didn't have any semblance of free speech. You've seen the photos and what have you of the iron mask that they put on Africans to keep us from talking and what have you. Emmett Till was a brilliant example of somebody that 14, 15-year-old child that they murdered and what have you, because they said he whistled at a white woman. The issue of free speech is something that has been absolutely necessary for us to fight for. And I'm saying this because clearly we didn't need Russians or anybody else to tell us, that we had to fight for free speech. This was something that our relationships to this colonial system told us that we had to wage that struggle. And we had to wage that struggle because we were captives. In fact, we're the only people who came here not looking for a better way of life. This whole notion about America being, how did they characterize it? A nation of immigrants. And they're fighting immigrants now. Well, we never came as immigrants. We came as captives. That's how we were here. And that's the thing that still has not been resolved. It's all these unresolved issues associated with the emergence of this system that's responsible for attacks on Venezuela, attacks on Iran, attacks on African people in various places around the world. These are unresolved contradictions. And that's why it's so important that colonizers in the United States, white people, are able to recognize and unite with the struggle that we have against this colonial system and our relationship to it. Some, some people in this meeting have been with us when we talk about the struggle, how we had to fight for Black power, for power of our own lives, and then some white person who loves us said, well, what about the Indians, etc. Like if they were fighting for the Indians, like somehow we raised this, and they would pit the struggle of indigenous people against our right to be self-determining, which is a bogus kind of argument. So I just wanted to say that, and I wanted to say also that in terms of the issue about what is happening, what was that question that was raised? Because the point I wanted to make is that one of the reasons you see the contradictions in the Trump administration, and not just within the Trump administrations, but within the whole social system, is resistance. Is because the people are resisting, because there would be no discussion. We wouldn't even be having this discussion right now. We wouldn't have this discussion right now if we simply complied when they told us to come out the house with our hands up, and then they made a suggestion that we could cop some kind of some plea deal and what have you, and go to prison for less time than what they would give us otherwise. Only reason we're having this discussion is we didn't accept that. We resisted. The same thing is true with Venezuela. The same thing is true everywhere. And this is the thing that calls into questions the whole strategic goals that they've laid out for themselves. And this is what makes it necessary for them to debate. That's why somebody had to quit from I forgot the name of the security entity, because of the attack that was being made on Iran. Why, these contradictions are there even between the United States and its quote unquote colonial allies. Now, because people are resisting, they wouldn't have this discussion if the Gulf of Hormuz was not an issue. Now you see England saying, well, that's your fight. We're not engaged in it. Even NATO is refusing to participate. NATO that killed Gaddafi, that participated in killing Gaddafi. They said, we won't go with you this time because of the resistance and how it's being more and more generalized. I think it's really important to say that. And also to say that I need to recognize the role that has been played in this process by the first combatant, Onozine Yeshitela. People hear the name and stuff like that, and know that we're married, and sometimes I think there's unfair presumption that that's the basis of her influence in our movement, that we are married or something to that effect. That's only because people don't know how it really works, and the real influence, legitimate influence. And so it's a presumption that's buried in it, of course, is this anti-woman, kind of thing. But she's played a fundamental role and has been responsible for pushing and creating many of the anti-colonial expressions that's right here in St. Louis that everybody here is going to come and see when you come to our plenary, April 17th, 18th, and 19th. So those are a couple of things I wanted to say. Uhuru.
Uhuru, Chairman.
But
Thank you so much.
the thing is that they have to say that it's the Russians who told us what to do. Or if not the Russians, some other entity. They have to say that to protect the legitimacy of the relationship this government has to African people. Why in the world will we be fighting back, fighting against this wonderful U.S. Government and all the wonderful things they've done for the poor Black people? Why in the hell would we accept some external, evil force intervene and guard them to say? And plus, Africans are not smart enough to think of things on their own, which is a lie, a fabrication they've created a long time ago to try to explain the reason they dominate every aspect of our lives. And, somebody mentioned Woodrow Wilson, who was the president in 1919. And this is the guy who facilitated the rise of the Ku Klux Klan in this country, showed this Birth of a Nation film at the White House. That was a film that really led to a rapid development of the Ku Klux Klan in this country. So that's what we're looking at. And, I mean, and you can go all throughout the history and see this kind of relationship. And we reject that. We're not gonna be the footstools of anybody anymore. And that's what we are calling on people. We're hoping on you. We're not talking to the U.S. government now, but the people in this meeting who are resisting. And we hope that you'll be able to extend your need to resist to the fight that African people must make in order to be a self-determining, self-governing people. Uhuru.
Yes. Uhuru, Chairman. Yes, Africa speaks for itself, and that's really important. And I see in the chat here, Comrade Paulette Dotier writes, Uhuru sisterhood is powerful. And I unite with that fully, and just wanted to join in, saluting Deputy Chair Onozine Shatella, who has, really transformed a lot of the work in the movement. And, and like we said, you got to come to St. Louis and see the real concrete work that is being done on the ground. That is the reason we were under attack. One of the many reasons, but they couldn't deny the, overturning of, the colonial contradictions in North St. Louis under the party's leadership. So salute to Comrade Deputy Chair. And I see our comrade Penny Hess has her hand raised. Uhuru, Chairwoman.
Uhuru, what a great program today. It was very, very powerful. And I just really wanted to salute Chairman Omali Shatella, my leadership, and Deputy Chair Onozine Shatella, and unite with the chairman's call for people to come to the African People's Socialist Party's plenary April 17th, 18th, and 19th, which is going to be here in St. Louis, and very, very powerful. I also wanted to ask if there are comrades on this call who are in Atlanta, could we form an ad hoc committee to really build an event the night before, which Chairman Omali Shatella has proposed that we would do before the oral arguments, and we don't have the exact date yet, but we know that it is the week of July 20th. So we will get the exact dates at some point soon, I hope. We would like to have an event so we can go deeper into these questions the chairman is talking about. So profound. What he's saying, the intertwinement of all of the struggles of oppressed and colonized people and the struggle of African people inside the borders of the United States for national liberation, the role of white people, all of these questions, we would have time to discuss. The chairman would be there. So if you would like to help build something in Atlanta, we know we have a number of comrades in general who have been part of Hands Off Uhuru, Hands Off Africa, who are from Atlanta. Please put your name in the chat, and we will be in touch with you about building a powerful event and action there, getting all out to the appeal, to the oral arguments in July. And yeah, so put your name in the chat, and let's have an ad hoc committee to start doing that, building that, Uhuru. And I see maybe Paulette is saying something there.
I see Comrade Paulette said, let me know how I can help with Jericho movement. Uhuru, Comrade Paulette, yes, we'll definitely be in touch with you and again, others who are in even the surrounding areas, or maybe you have comrades or others who are there in Atlanta, help them get in touch with us. They can also email us at info@handsoffuhuru.org or coalition@handsoffuhuru.org, either of those emails. So thank you, Chairwoman Penny, for that call. And comrades, we are actually coming to the close of our event for today. So with that, I just want to really appreciate everybody who has tuned on. I want to take a moment to really salute our chat moderator here on Zoom. Those of you tuning in on YouTube, I want to salute those who are doing the calculations behind the scene, and really want to salute our AV, technical team as well. All of this, requires organization and and unity. And I just really want to salute you, comrades, who have been, helping on with this since day one. Thank you to my co-MC, Chairman Penny, keynote speaker, Chairman Amalia Shatella. Thank you, Comrade Chair Jesse, for your presentation and the update on the appeal as well. And it was great to have Susan Adderley on with us earlier, attorney with National Lawyers Guild, representing as well. So before we're going to go ahead and pull up the announcement slides. And we want to invite everybody to share this webinar. As was stated, there was important updates on today. People can come back and tune on. We love you too, Jackie. Thank you so much for being on and for your participation in today's webinar, as always. So Uhuru comrades, we want to encourage everybody to, find a friend, bring your organization into this organization, this coalition, the Hands Off Uhuru, Hands Off Africa Fightback Coalition. You can read our demands, read our statement of unity, see how you can join by going to handsoffuhuru.org/coalition. And we want to just unite with the call, hands off Uhuru, hands off Africa, hands off Venezuela. We say, long live the Bolivarian Revolution. And we say, stop the U.S. attacks on President Maduro and the people of Venezuela, the People's Bolivarian Government. And we want to, we want to keep this up because we will be continuing to, have boots on the ground and work to forward this initiative to free President Maduro and first combatant Celia Flores. I want to just bring back again one thing that we mentioned earlier in today's webinar, and also want to salute the D12 organization, the D12 movement, who was there on the front lines, again, following the attacks on the Uhuru 3, and who have now calling on people to, support this petition commemorating the 25th anniversary of the Durban Declaration, the foundation of our international reparations movement. And so what they are calling on people to do is, there is a link that we've shared in the chat actually several times, but it seems to not be working sometimes. So we'll make sure this is up even on our calendar ongoing through the 29th, so people can come back to handsoffuhuru.org/events and just sign on the petition. But they're calling for everybody to endorse August 29, 2026 as the Day for Reparations and Pan-African Solidarity. We want to encourage others to sign this petition. 2026 marks an important year in the struggle for, reparations, and marks the 25th anniversary of the UN World Conference Against Racism, which produced the Durban Declaration and the Program of Action. So this is an announcement for everybody to, join on and sign that petition. And we want to encourage everybody to, those of you who are interested, we call on you to help to continue to build the Latin America front of the Hands Off Uhuru, Hands Off Africa Fightback Coalition. We say, hasta la victoria siempre. Join our monthly meeting. We meet on the second Tuesday of every month. We'll be meeting in April. You can email us at coalition@handsoffuhuru.org if you're interested and you want more information. And as was mentioned earlier, there is a meeting to build committees of Hands Off Uhuru, Hands Off Africa. So this will be on Thursday, April 23rd at 4 p.m. Pacific, 7 p.m. Eastern, 6 p.m. Central. You can register for that right now by going to handsoffuhuru.org/meeting. And we want to remind everybody, as you know, don't stop talking about the Uhuru 3. This is your case. This is your fight. And we must win this precedent-setting case. So you can subscribe to our mailer list. Also, if you want more information, by going to handsoffuhuru.org/subscribe, and you can enter in your email address and get, updates regularly. So stay connected with us on social media. If you're talking about the Uhuru 3, we ask people to hashtag Hands Off Uhuru, use the @sign, keep us looped. Let's do all we can to beat the algorithms, as well. And we want to encourage everybody to come to St. Louis for the International Plenary of the African People's Socialist Party. This is something that this is an institution of the African People's Socialist Party that we weren't able to hold for the past 3 years because of the raids. And so we have so much to sum up, so much to, so many victories to acknowledge, and the way forward is very clear. So we want to encourage everybody to come. And the theme is this time till it's won, power in our own hands. It's not just Trump, it's the whole damn system. So April 17th and 19th in St. Louis, you can register in person or online by going to apsplenary.org. So Uhuru comrades, that will conclude today's program. I just wanted to see, I don't know, Chairman, if you have anything that you'd like to say as we close, and I'll turn it to you. And I just wanted to say, hands off Uhuru, hands off Africa, and comrades, we are winning. Uhuru.
Uhuru, relentless.